We're ready to begin this afternoon's school board briefing meeting. The time is 2:03 p.m. I would like to say that two people are not sitting here this afternoon. One, Mr. Teuber, has had surgery today, and Mrs. Dozier is ill. She will be attending this evening. And I would like to say happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much.
It's Dr. Graham's birthday.
No, getting old required applause, but thank you very much.
Believe me, it does.
So, Dr. Graham, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, we are going to start with multiple policy changes still on Chapter 1, and then we've got 2 from Chapter 4 and 1 from Chapter 9 that Mr. Dodick's going to present. The others are a continuation of the conversation you all have been having about Chapter 1. So, Ms. Elkin and Mr. Martin.
Good afternoon, board members, Madam Superintendent. We are ready to move forward with a number of policies, and we'll go through those one by one. The first one we're going to look at is School Board Member Code of Ethics. This is the first time we've had the opportunity to have an in-depth discussion. We looked at this back in May, earlier in the year, and we kind of tabled it until now. So this is a pre-briefing. So this is a wonderful opportunity for you to look at that, give us some input and comments before we move forward and schedule it for a briefing and public hearing, if that's what's desired. I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Martin because he drafted this brand new policy for us.
Board members, you discussed this draft policy before. You'll recall that this was my attempt to create a policy to establish a code of ethics to meet the accreditation requirement. And there have been a couple of changes made since your last brief discussion. There's some language added at the introduction. In the last sentence there, these standards are expectations for board member conduct. The adoption of such standards is not intended to compel compliance. Those two sentences were added. And then you'll see a change in section 3, subsections B, C, and D to provide a positive presentation of those issues.
Yep.
That's all I have.
It's all, board members, any comments or questions on this Policy 1.05?
I just want to thank Mr. Martin for putting this together, and it meets the requirements of what our recommendations were from the accreditation, and it's clear and concise, and I appreciate it.
I concur.
As
Thank
do
you.
I. Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Okay, we'll bring this one back for a formal briefing in October, and then a public hearing later on that month. The next board policy I have for you is 1.07. We did pre-brief this previously, so this is our formal briefing, and we only made a couple of changes since the last time we got together. The first change is on line 40, and if you remember when we spoke the last time at the briefing, we talked about the timeline of results, so we added that wording 30 days after the release of state assessment data. And then if you turn to the next page, lines 55 and 56, that's the other change that we made, which reflects the timeline.
Thank you.
Okay.
May I interrupt just for a second? If we could get one of the side screens turned off, that would make the sound better in the audience. Thanks, Jason.
These lights are bright today.
They always are.
Okay, so with those updates, are there any questions you have before we bring this back the end of the month for a public hearing?
I have none.
I've done.
None. You're good.
Okay. The next policies, we have 1.13, and we have 1.15, 4.04, and 4.21, and 9.05. All of these have previously been pre-briefed. No changes have been made since they were pre-briefed, and they are ready for tonight. This is your formal briefing, and then they will come back for public hearing at the end of the month. So being there are no changes, I just wanted to make sure there were no additional questions or concerns you had about any of these.
There was,
Yes, ma'am?
and are we down to 9.05 too
Yes.
as well?
Yes, ma'am?
Okay. there was one issue with regard to 9.05 with the use of facilities and charging of rentals. At one time, educational support groups who provided extra, let's say, Lee County Math Council or Lee County Reading Council, when they would provide training at a facility, one of our facilities, they were waived any charges for those because the teachers could use that for in-service credit and it was for benefit of their professional development. I don't see that within here, so I just have a question regarding that.
Okay, and I'm going to look to Mr. Mora as he drafted this policy and brought it forward the last time.
Paragraph 3.
Dr. Graham. The update to policy 9.05 was basically to coordinate it with the interlocal agreement we have with the Board of County Commissioners and the Parks and Recreation. I don't know if there was any intention to look at specific events like that and bring that as a waived opportunity as well. I'm sure it could be added. I don't think the current language suggests that. That would be up to the board members to recommend.
Mr. Martin?
I think the present language that may apply to that situation is the sentence before, which says that the fee may be waived when the organization using this facility will provide some benefit to the school district through and as a result of the activity.
All right.
I think it may be covered presently under that language.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding any of these before we bring them back the end of the month for public hearing?
No?
No.
You're good.
Okay,
Nice
less
job.
than 40 minutes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Mora.
These job descriptions were part of the budget process, and on the list of positions that are coming through the budget process, these were positions that needed a new job description, and we wanted to brief them before we asked you to vote on them. Christina, go ahead.
Yes. Good afternoon, board members, Dr. Graham and Mr. Martin. I'm here this afternoon to provide you with an overview of the new job descriptions for the ESOL compliance specialist, the generator mechanic, and the healthy living lab presenter. These job descriptions were developed in partnership with the applicable departments and the Department of Compensation and Recruitment. They were then reviewed and approved by the Budget Committee during the FY16 budget process. And as Dr. Graham stated, these positions are associated already with the budget that Dr. Desamores will be providing later on today. The ESOL compliance specialist will assist with the coordination and placement of English language learners at the district and school levels in order to provide a consistent level of support to ensure FDE collection. The generator mechanic position will repair, test, and troubleshoot generators in a cost-effective manner to help assist and support the goals of the district. And the Healthy Living Lab presenter will provide mobilized, interactive nutrition and wellness education to students. Are there any questions? Thank you for your time this afternoon.
I have none.
Thank you.
Okay.
No, thank you very
Great.
much.
Thank you.
The focus of this presentation will be to share the results of the RFP process for dental insurance. And as Ms. Malay has taught me over time. The goal of a presentation like this is to explain the qualifications of the company that's being recommended.
Good afternoon, board members, Superintendent Mr. Martin. We're going to present to you this afternoon the results of our dental RFP. And before we begin, I would like to publicly thank those people in the audience that were part of that process, because without their involvement and help, we wouldn't have as much of a input as we do. So raise your hand, those of you that were involved. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Susan to begin to talk to you a little bit about the process, and then I will get into the content.
Good afternoon, board members, Dr. Graham and Mr. Martin. Wanted to share with you the process that we followed for the dental RFP. We released the RFP in late April, and on May 26th, we received 3 responses. The 3 vendors are listed on the slide presentation that you received. Aetna Insurance Company, Delta Dental, and Metropolitan Life were the 3 vendors who submitted proposals to us. You have received an advanced copy of the presentation, so there's a lot of supporting information in there. We're going to hit the highlights today and see if you have any questions. So once the responses were received, all of the proposals were evaluated and scored by the evaluation committee. The committee included representation from FEA, insurance and benefits, the teachers, etc. The evaluation committee ranked all 3 proposals and determined who we would invite to interviews and negotiations, and the committee elected to invite all 3 proposers for interviews and negotiations. So we conducted those interviews with the 3 proposers. The evaluation committee unanimously selected a top-ranked vendor and presented that to the insurance task force. The task force approved the recommendation presented to them, which was for MetLife to provide the services, and that recommendation will be brought before the board for your vote at a future meeting. Let's see. The criteria that was used to evaluate the proposers both in the interview process as well as in the negotiation phase was published in advance, which is part of the process. We articulate what will be evaluated and how the scoring will occur, and so that information was shared in the presentation, so we'll just flip on through that unless you have any questions. As I mentioned, the recommendation was brought forward for MetLife to be the vendor of choice for the new plans. We thought it would be important to share with you some of the key differentiators that drove to this decision for MetLife, and I'd like to ask Dr. Pruitt to share that information with you.
First and foremost, we just want to acknowledge that all 3 vendors are good vendors, and that's why all 3 were invited to participate in the interview process. And a survey through the state indicates that all 3 vendors are utilized pretty equally throughout the state. So it really came down to the differentiating points for us relative to those final interviews. Kind of like when you review resumes and then you kind of bring in those top resumes and do the interviews, and that's where it really narrows it down for you, and that was the case with this process. And so some of the key things that were kind of came through for us were the fact that MetLife really provided the most clear and cohesive proposal without any deviations, and really came to the table with all the players and all the information needed. Another real key point was when you're dealing with the dental, you have your core group of providers, and then with MetLife and with Delta Dental, they have what's called an expanded network, which expands the number of providers. But the difference was with MetLife that the reimbursement would stay the same, and that wasn't the case with Delta Dental. So really, you're looking at the cost, what we deduct from the employee's paycheck, as well as when I'm sitting in the dental chair, what am I paying when I go to check out? And so MetLife came out ahead on that. The other thing is that there'll be no issues if somebody is in the middle of a treatment and then they cross, we cross plans, they will get to continue that benefit, so there won't be an issue with that in terms of somebody being, oh no, I'm halfway through my crown and now you guys have switched plans on me, so what do I do? So no issues there in terms of transferring over. And again, MetLife just really had the least number of things we had to clarify. We had a few questions for them versus 15 to 20 that we had for the other proposers, just because it wasn't clear. And even then, we still weren't able to get some of the information that we were looking to get. And then some other highlights are having an on-site rep 2 days a week during the open enrollment time, and then 1 day a week for the rest of the time, that we will send them, this is who's on our plan and what the bill is versus the other way around. So it really reduces that, having issues with employees and who's covered and what plan and all of that kind of thing. And providing us a $5,000 implementation allowance to help us get the word out to the employees. And then just in the way that we're reporting the information, they agreed to a weekly file feed, which was kind of a struggle for us to get that with the other vendors. So those were some of the highlights and why MetLife came out ahead in the end. And there's 3 plans. There's the high, the mid, and the low PPO. We really, in looking at the plans that we wanted to offer employees, it was based on a data-driven decision, based on, you guys had the benchmarking report in February, and we really looked at what the employee feedback was, and we pretty much learned that that low plan just wasn't, it may have not cost a lot of money out of paycheck, but when it came down to it, it really wasn't a plan that we felt the employees were really liking. So that's why we switched over to looking at the PPO plans. Your diagnostic and preventative services are covered at 100%, and they do not go towards the maximum, so, which is a good benefit because we had that issue in the past. And this was a new one for me about missing tooth. If you have a missing tooth from previous, for maybe 20 years ago when you couldn't afford to get an implant, that's a lot of plans wouldn't cover that, but MetLife is going to be covering that. And again, no waiting period. And they gave us a 2-year rate guarantee, and then some other rate caps and guarantees. There's also some from performance measures that they've guaranteed us, which is a good thing. We talked about the on-site support, and then the user-friendly portals for employees to utilize. In terms of the access, MetLife had the best access in terms of within 10 miles of where employees live, they have access to at least 2 of the providers. So we were really looking at making the providers be close to where the employees live, and a minimal disruption when crossing from, one plan to the other. And then we have for you, hopefully you had a chance to look at the plan options. Again, we talked about the high, the mid, and the low PPO plans. And then this is the cost. And we gave you the comprehensive notes at the bottom of the slide, so hopefully that kind of provides you an overview, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay. Board members.
Well, I have the pleasure of being the board liaison for the Insurance Task Force meeting, so I have no questions. I have to say I'm very impressed with the processes that they do have in place, and I really do believe, and I believe many of those processes were the same as in the past, correct? They're extremely ethical. On top of everything, I really don't believe we have anything to question when they do bring something forward. They have done their best research.
Thank you. It was comprehensive and easy to understand, and we appreciate it.
I just have one question. How much time had passed before we started to hear complaints about Humana when we had Humana?
She and I weren't actually here at the
Oh.
time, I'm not sure.
Well, I guess then my question would be this: given our experience with Humana, does it make sense perhaps at some point, maybe 3 to 6 months into the contract, we do a survey with employees and make certain that we're getting the
Certainly, we could do that.
It's not a direction, just a question for reflection.
One thing that did come out as they were talking about it, and I went back and looked at notes, many of the people that had complaints before were the ones that were in the low PPO. And it wasn't a PPO, it was an HMO. And so a lot of people made choices based on the cost, and that looked really good at the time until you stop to consider. And I really like the fact that it's now all PPO across the board. And then people will see that they do have a lot more available to them. So, yeah.
Yeah, our goal was to, get the best bang for the buck while providing the most satisfaction to employees is what we were focused on.
Well, I just think given that there is a change, it'd be nice to validate.
I do recall that one of the survey items was when we evaluated early, a lot of people hadn't been yet, because if you only go to the dentist once a year or every 6 months, we need that time to actually have a visit take place. So we would want to take that into consideration.
Very good thinking.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Martin, you don't have anything? Dr. Desamore, where is she?
Dr. Desamore?
Yeah.
She's back there.
Oh, there she is. I know I saw her come in. I didn't. She is.
Hello, Dr. Graham, members of the board. Each of you should have received in your briefing documentation a draft copy of the 5-10-20 facilities work plan that will be going to the DOE. Per statute, it must be approved by our school board by October 1st, so there will be a public hearing on this document at our next board meeting. And we have talked about this in terms of what's built in that 5-10-20 plan. According to the rules of what we have to send to the state, we have to send some information to them in each of those 3 time windows, 5, 10, and 20. Of course, the longer you go out, the hazier it gets. So this is just a draft copy of what you can expect to approve on the 22nd through public hearing that we will send to the DOE. Now remember, we talked about this before as it related to the superintendent's goal. This is the mandatory document that must go to the state, and then kind of in conjunction with this or in addition to this, then we're also preparing some other things related to the goal that you all set forth for the superintendent back a couple meetings ago. So I'll take any questions related to the document.
We're an easy group today.
I see.
Very easy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is Ralph. Oh, there she is.
Good afternoon, board members, Dr. Graham, Mr. Martin. We are here today to do a briefing for the assessment schedule that is required to be approved by October 1 and submitted to the Department of Education. What we'd like to do first is to just run through the same document that we presented before, and then I'd like to talk to you about some huge changes that you see in the assessment schedule because of some discussion that teachers have had and administrators have had with members of the department and what we feel may be in the best interest for the district. So if we could go through the PowerPoint for just a second.
I'm gonna insert, we have to have a calendar. And so we have altered the calendar that we started with in an attempt to have one that everybody can breathe and live with comfortably. I want everyone to know going in, we will not have the same amount of data that we would have had we stuck with the original calendar. And so the dashboard and some of the other things that we have planned will be limited in comparison to what it might have been. And I just want to go on record that we could be richer in the data we could analyze with the original calendar. This calendar is an attempt to compromise with those who believe that they don't need that much data. Just putting it on the table the way it is.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
And having said that, what we are presenting does meet the letter of the law. So that, but we need a calendar, and I was as concerned, we all were, that we have a calendar by October 1st than to have nothing. And so we have compromised in order to get a calendar that everybody can live with. So you listen to it, and if you're comfortable, we'll be comfortable. It's just, I just want you to know, we've made a lot of commitments as far as what will be available in the dashboard, and not as much progress monitoring will be accomplished.
Okay, good afternoon. In addition to the requirement that we have one approved, a testing schedule approved by October 1st, it also has to be included in the parent guide and the code of conduct. And Ms. Ralph will talk to you a little bit more about that timeline on the next slide. We have made some revisions, as has been noted. Some of them we talked to you about last time, so we have inserted the VPK assessments, and one of the requirements is to note whether assessments are computer-based or paper-based, so there's an indicator in the schedule for that. And we also have a blanket statement at the end that results will be available to students and parents within 30 days of the administration date, which is also a requirement. We anticipate some other revisions, and that is primarily because the state has not finalized the plans primarily around the ELL assessment and the ESE alternate assessment, so they are noted in the schedule as to be determined. We expect the state to publish a revised state testing calendar next week, or at the latest mid-September. So we really want to reserve the right to make those changes when we receive those. In addition to that, we have requested from the DOE to extend some of the state testing windows which overlap with our spring break. We would, if they do not approve that, we'll have a very short timeline in trying to accomplish those assessments. We expect approval, and so that would also be revised in here when we receive that news from the DOE. So now Ms. Ralph will go through some of the other changes that were referred to.
Can you pull this one up, please? Dr. Idson is going to pull up the schedule. You have it in your packet where it has the estimated testing times for non-English language learners and estimated testing time for English language learners.
I apologize. I'm trying to find that.
It's up at the top under 9-8 meetings.
Okay, thank
If you
you.
open that, then you'll see the briefing meeting, and then you can find the presentation.
Thank you. Is this it here?
Is that district calendar?
Nope, that's not it.
That's not it.
I'm not seeing it here at the moment.
Part
I
of the briefing
apologize.
agenda. If you have the agenda, it's right on the agenda.
It's in the agenda.
Okay. Where do I?
So much for a wonderful plan that's going to go smoothly. While he's pulling it up, if you want to just look at it, what we have done, because I did not want to cause any more confusion than I was going to cause by presenting it to you, what we did is we left the grade levels the same, and we left the original numbers that we had presented to you at the pre-briefing. But after we went through the process with staff to review what was required, the state testing requirements, and to meet the letter of the law, as Dr. Graham said, for progress monitoring in the statute 1008.25 4B, which tells us that we have to progress monitor our students who are at level 1, 2, and 3 in ELA and math. It also gives the flexibility to the administrator of the school, of course with input from staff, to exempt students that are level 4 and 5 from having to take assessments or be reviewed for progress monitoring.
Oh, I printed it out.
To show that a student is being progress monitored, you can have an individual education plan. You can have a school-wide system of progress monitoring for all students, which is typically what we have done here, or you can have an individualized progress monitoring plan. That's what we're proposing, where that we will look at the individual student. That will put a lot of responsibility on the individual teacher and the administrator at the school to ensure that we are progress monitoring all of the students, that we are providing them assistance and growth, and that we are ensuring their success. In curriculum and staff development, although we created several assessments that could be used for progress monitoring, and those assessments were created in conjunction with teachers over the summer and throughout the beginning of the school year. And while teachers were very supportive and were excited to have those assessments to progress monitor, when school actually started and they saw all of the things that they were going to have to do, the time frame, I think they became slightly nervous about the amount of time that it was going to take. So thus, there was a town hall meeting last week. I think Mrs. Fisher was in attendance, and there were individuals that spoke out with concerns, and we've listened to their concerns. While change is very difficult and we have to make the decisions that are in the best interest of the school, as Dr. Graham said, we are meeting the letter of the law, but your dashboards will not have as much data on them as you were hoping. So with our strategic plan for Focus Area 6, driving decisions with data, you're not going to see as much. Yes, ma'am.
No, don't go ahead and finish your thought.
Okay. The other thing that we want to make sure that we're doing is that we are giving that flexibility to the principal to communicate with the staff at the school so that they can make a school decision on the level 4s and 5s. I've heard you on several occasions speak of that you don't want students put in holding rooms while others are taking assessments. We don't want to lose 1 minute of instruction. So I think it has to be a very coordinated effort with the administration and the faculty at the school to ensure that's going to happen.
Now I will interrupt.
Okay.
So what did you learn from this pushback? What could we have done differently as an administration? Because to me, this data is really important. I think, what's happening we've seen how important it is at the classroom level, and there was a real interest at the board level to get a better understanding of where our kids were successful and where we might need to think about better or different resources. So it sounds like you had a plan to sort of bring everybody into the process, and then as you said, once you started, panic set in.
Yes, ma'am.
What would you do differently now that you've had a chance to think about it?
I think communication is a big tool. You keep in mind that we have not had a standards tracking tool with the Lee County school system. I think the teachers were not familiar with what that tool was going to do. They don't have, I don't want to say they don't have, they do understand the importance of it, but I don't think that they understand that what we were going to do, and you as board members and their administrators with that tool, is to use that tool to provide assistance to them. We have wonderful resources that we have created with input from teachers that are available to use. We can provide more targeted professional development to those teachers that are having issues in the classroom. So while change in this case was not going to be a positive for this time and this school year, I think it's up to us to communicate how we can do this better. We can all learn together, and hopefully by the end of the year, we will have teachers saying, hey, we want this for next year.
So people don't understand the utility and of this. Okay.
There's been strong reaction early on without the opportunity to roll it out and teach as we go. And so, to be frank, we're responding to the reaction. I'm very disturbed that, 3 or 4 days into the school year, people are making all sorts of assumptions about the schedule that we put out there. But rather than fight it, we're going to have to spend this year trying to educate, and it's teachers are struggling with, in some cases, being told what they need to do progress monitoring wise, and there is the sentiment among some who speak to the board often that we shouldn't be doing any of this. So we're trying to find a compromise, and so we are doing what the state requires. We wanted our progress monitor to be a little more robust. It just won't be, and so what we're going to have to do this year is continue to educate. If we can add this and this, you could have the same information in this area or the same information on this standard. So we are trying to respond to a reaction. I struggle with that a little bit, but we need the calendar.
So is assessment then viewed by some number of staff still as a punitive, as opposed to a developmental?
I don't think this was about punitive or developmental. I think this was about, we can do it a better way if you just let us do it ourselves. So I think, honestly, I think that's some of what we're dealing with. And that's not a criticism, but there are teachers who have done very, very well collecting data, because some of the teachers that are pushing back have used data all along before it was even popular to do it. So I think the struggle is, we were prescribing what that might look like, and the reason we're doing that is because we are desperate to have common data on our students to really see how they are progressing as a whole, and we are reluctant to rely on the state to provide that for us anytime soon. So this was our attempt. Regardless of what everybody else was doing, Lee County would be able to say, yes, our kids are progressing, and they're progressing at this rate, and the 4s and 5s are staying or getting stronger, and the strugglers are pushing on, and so we believe we were headed in the right direction, but sometimes you have to step back.
Okay.
Again, I think had it been allowed to play out a little bit, people would have just relaxed, but it was another thing at the beginning of the year. And it's not that teachers in total weren't aware, because teachers helped develop the calendar and the instruments that we're using, but, some weren't a part, and so I just think we needed to step back. And the only reason I made the point to say that we have changed it, I'll speak for me. I'm not wholeheartedly excited about these changes, but I think in the interest of moving forward, they needed to happen so that teachers can get comfortable with what we're doing. Principals were on board with the calendar as it was. I think they were surprised as well when they started getting, because as it was being explained in preschool, the pushback began. And so So I think it's just a year to educate a little more. And we are sharing that with you only because we made commitments in the strategic plan, and we made commitments to you as a board about what kind of progress monitoring data you would receive, and you will be receiving less because it won't exist, because we're not going to get it from the state, and we were trying to get it ourselves. So I just think it'll be a year of education.
Thank you.
The other document that you can see is we took all of the original assessments that were listed, and so that you have a good understanding of what has been reduced, we actually marked through those that are no longer going to be required, so that you also have another way of looking at the changes that have been made. But again, these tools are available, they're resources that it can be used by the schools. We will continue to provide those as needed, and the principal can make the decision along with his staff or her staff as to how they wish to use those. The comparison, unfortunately, if you are looking at the dashboard, you may have one school that will be using these tools as resources, and another school may be using something different. So you're not comparing apples to apples, but hopefully we're comparing the same rigor of the standards.
I'm just delighted that you're able, that those teachers and principals who are able to embrace this may proceed with it, even if some choose not to. That's great. Thank you.
Anything else? Also, because this requires a public hearing with the Code of Conduct and the parent guide, we will have to wait, since this is a revised document compared to what we had originally put out. The public hearing, instead of being the end of the month, will have to be pushed to October. We have met with Mr. Martin to get some ideas about how to do that in the future so that it doesn't require a public hearing, and he's given us some wonderful advice about some notations and possibly separations to make ease of time in the future.
Okay, thank you. Can we have, it's okay. Question, once the calendar has been put in place and submitted to the state, here's my concern. We will not be getting common progress monitoring for our elementary students. That's my biggest concern. And with that, our elementary students who are grappling with beginning reading, beginning writing, there will not be a common measure that we can look at to provide the professional development and the resources for our teachers and our students. And that's where I have a bit of a concern. While the STAR test is it's an okay test, but you've got a reading specialist here. It is not diagnostic, it is not prescriptive, it does not tell you where the child is having a struggle. It gives you a reading level, but it doesn't tell you what the problem may be if they're not on level. So that's where I have a concern, and I'm sorry for sounding on a soapbox. Please, I apologize. I hope that we will, and that's nothing when I say I hope. Ms. Ralph, you and everyone who's worked on this, I appreciate all of the work that everyone's done.
It's been a team effort.
And I know there were a great many teachers who were involved with it.
Yes, ma'am.
I just hope that in the process of this, we are able to come up with something that we can even begin to implement this year that our district teachers will be able to support so that we can serve our students, especially those students who move from school to school.
As Dr. Graham and Mrs. Morgan said, it is our job to educate, to make sure that staff are ready and they understand the need for it, and that will be a goal for us this year to help them understand, to hear their voices and understand what they truly need so that we can design that tool for them.
And they need to know, some of them may need to know what it is they truly need to find out.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
Yeah, I just was interested in the comment that many of the teachers did not understand the value of the common progress monitoring. And I guess that piece of it disturbs me, because when you roll out something of this magnitude, I would think that the people who have to implement it at the very basic level would have an understanding, and that we would have checked for understanding through our leadership. So that concerns me. And then, as I was listening to the conversation, the parts that are stricken are no longer required.
Yes, ma'am.
We are only doing what is required by the state. But the state has not finalized their plan for ELL and ESE students yet, so we don't know what they require for them. Okay. So the other progress monitoring tools are available, optional?
They're optional as to whether the schools, as I said, with the administration, the instructional leader of the school, and the staff to make the decision as to whether they will use those.
Okay, and so that was what I was looking for, because I thought here you said that the principal will decide. So I would hope that the principal would decide along with the staff, so that the communication is clear and we know that everyone involved understands what's happening.
Definitely.
I mean, I totally understand the need for a common assessment in this day and age, and I just want for us to have all of our building blocks in place before we start raising the building. When we had the town hall meeting at the Cape Coral Library, thank you, Talc and Spalk, many teachers were very articulate and quite clear that they did not object to the assessments. It was the number of assessments, the length of the assessments, and the time involved in administering and taking those. So as we move forward, first I want to thank everyone who has done a lot of work, I know, to do this. And I know you guys worked all weekend, and that's above and beyond, and that is very much appreciated. So I just hope that as we move forward in establishing our own progress monitoring, that we have everyone who needs to be on board and understanding in that position. Thank you.
I just want to reiterate, teachers were involved in the development of the original calendar and of the assessment. So again, we've got some educating to do, and I will just say, at some point, when we get a larger percentage of acceptance, the board's going to have to be willing to say, okay, maybe 100% of the teachers aren't excited about this, but it's the right thing to do. At some point, that's going to have to happen. So I understand why we're doing this right now, but we will never, as much as we'd like to, we'll never get 100% of the teachers to be excited about being told what to do.
And if I can just add a comment to that, there were some teachers who said they had been involved in it, but that they thought that there were issues with the items, and that they themselves were not satisfied and ready to participate in rolling that out. So that was an indicator to me that we still have work to do.
We do.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we'll always have work to do.
We will.
Any more questions? Will it be the board's decision to move forward tonight? This item is on the agenda to approve the calendar, or would the board prefer to table that? I know Mr. Martin had indicated we could go ahead and leave it on, or whether the board wishes to table it for the next meeting. It would be, we have made all the changes, and honestly, in respect to some changes that need to be made to meet the state guidelines and for progress monitoring, if we could go ahead and proceed with the board agenda item tonight so that we could get closure and move on, because we want to communicate this information to our teachers and administrators.
Any objection, Mrs. Fisher?
Okay, so the public hearing then will take place after we've already adopted the calendar?
Public hearing takes place after the calendar has been adopted, because all we're changing is for the parent part of the code of conduct.
Okay, regarding the changes that are made here, and in consideration for our two colleagues who are not here, and I'm sure one at least is not hearing or seeing any of this today, I would like to suggest that we wait until the next meeting, which would still give us time to adopt in advance of October 1.
On the next, and at that meeting, there will be 3 board members here.
Yep. Ms. LaRiviere?
The changes that were made were simply deletions, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And the changes that were made are, we are still in compliance statutorily.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't imagine, and I cannot read minds. I don't think that anyone on the board would have an objection to that change in our moving forward. However, I will also point out that even though we will have only 3 board members at the next meeting, you will not be able to participate in that meeting, will
I
you?
may, I'm not sure.
And the other board member then would be Mr. Toiber, correct? And we don't know if he'll be able to be here by phone or whatever, as he will be rehabilitating.
The concern is if we wait until the 22nd, and you all have any, I mean, you may discuss tonight and say, no, we want this and this and this changed. We still have time to bring it to another board meeting. If we wait until the 22nd, we have no other board meeting then before the deadline of October 1st, which is when it's to be sent to the state.
And that's what happened last year.
That's the push. We're trying to get it in a timely manner to the state.
Well, I'm happy to keep it in for tonight's agenda.
I'm fine with keeping it for tonight. We don't know for sure yet whether or not Mrs. Dozier will be able to participate via phone.
She's planning to be here.
She's planning on being here as of now. Okay. So we will have 4 of us here.
Then I'll say that I'm happy to keep the agenda item for tonight for discussion.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, board members. Dr. Graham. Good afternoon, board members. Dr. Graham, Mr. Martin. We are here today to brief you on the high school and middle school program of studies and student progression plan. We initially briefed these documents with you on July 28th. Per your request, the documents have been formatted to a final draft version for your review, and those documents are on your briefing backup material. The program of studies and student progression plan are on the September 22nd board meeting agenda for approval.
Board members, questions, comments? We've seen this
I had
before?
none.
No?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Move forward.
Good.
All right, good afternoon, board members. If you recall, it wasn't that long ago that we brought you the digital classroom plan last year. We're back again. This is going to be an annual process for the foreseeable future, so we wanted to bring you the updated version of the plan and talk a little bit about our priorities with the funding that comes from the state for this plan. Okay. To remind you, the digital classroom plan is essentially, it's in legislation, and it is a plan that provides funding for districts to convert from textbooks to electronic instruction. And the funding can be spent in a variety of ways, but it's really around the transition to digital classrooms. And in our district, we aligned our expenditures and what our plan was to the strategic plan. And we also, we were expanding upon where we were last year when we brought this plan to you. Now, I did want to point out also that the digital classroom plan last year, there was a little bit of misinformation out there, thinking that this was the whole technology plan. And to put it in perspective, this is, approximately about 1/17 of the total plan when it comes to expenditure. So I want to point out, this isn't everything we're doing with technology. It's just how we're prioritizing the funding that we get from the state for this plan.
The digital classroom plan supports the Learner Active Classroom model that we have been working with by enabling teachers and students to access resources unavailable in a textbook. It provides opportunities for multiple resources for learning. Teachers and students are able to make data-driven decisions regarding instruction, and they are able to access resources for extension or intervention, providing an opportunity to develop personalized learning pathways for our students and the resources that they use.
And then on the other side of that then is looking at the instruction. So taking, using the active classroom, you can then take those personalized learning paths, and the teacher can then differentiate and include all students of all levels. So it allows during the actual instruction the teacher to be able to receive that information from whether it's the learning pathways, whether it's from the data that they've been able to gather. It also increases engagement, so it allows the students to have more live interaction, not live as in human being, but their own personal, something to interact with, I guess I'll say. So it gives some more opportunity. Also gives the opportunity for a teacher during instruction to increase that academic rigor. So how can I take it up for, we may all be learning multiplication, but how can I take it up for this student while this student is maybe doing 3-digit multiplication or multiplication with decimals while this student is, sorry Dwayne, still working on his math facts. So how can we kind of vary that so that way even within the classroom I can modify that rigor while still exposing Dwayne to some opportunities to have some of that rigor, that this is maybe where they're practicing but still has that opportunity. It also becomes a student-centered learning environment. So this is no longer about I as the teacher am delivering this content. I am delivering or focusing on this standard, but I'm then able to differentiate and target where each individual student needs. And it can be individual and collaborative learning. So as an individual learner, I can do an independent project or be working independently, but I can also collaborate. Have some experience of this with my own daughter, who is now experiencing some of the Chromebooks and being able to, I can log right on and give feedback back and forth, and they can work on group projects, and being able to see some of that interaction as well as some critical thinking. So it kind of takes that opportunity of I can think independently, and then I also have that opportunity as a learner to work with others.
Okay, so we receive approximately 1.6 million, and when I say we, I mean the county receives approximately 1.6 million in funding. Now, part of that goes to the charter schools, and the final number will all be determined based upon how many of those charter schools participate in the program. They have to submit a DCP plan like we do, but unlike last year, the district does not have to review and approve those plans, so that was a little bit of a cumbersome process for everyone last year. Now they'll submit them directly, and then what we will find out is what that net is. And we're anticipating the net to be around $1.4 million. And so we look at that, we prioritize that funding for areas where we're transitioning from our traditional instructional model to our digital instruction. So the focus for this year is basically to expand upon what we started last year. If you recall, last year we put in the platform for delivering content to a variety of types of devices, whether it's their device that they have at school or take home from school, or it's a personal device. We also spent quite a bit of our time bringing in content into this system. And so where we're focused for the next year is to expand upon our library and to also take traditional content where that we had in from previous adoptions and make that available electronically also. So you probably have heard me talk about the catch-22. When you give a student a device, they still have books, right? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to remove as many of the remove the necessity to carry books along with the device as much as possible by bringing in our previously adopted content. So then another and probably most important portion of this is PD. So we need to make sure that not only are we making the tools and the content available, but we are bringing in the professional development, both related to the content delivery platform and to methodology. So all of that is included in the training figures that you see. And so this is how it breaks down. Your equipment, software, and support, that's really the platform. That is how we deliver the content in the support contract for that. And it's about $372,000. You'll notice that the bulk of the funding goes towards content. And again, that content is across K-12, across the curriculum, with a concentration in certain areas, especially at the middle school, because we're using the one-to-one. And we have anticipated the needs and are already building the needs in there for the high schools that'll be rolling into one-to-one next year. And we're already anticipating the training. So we've bundled all of that in, looking forward to what we'll need, not only this school year, but as we roll into next school year. And then, of course, we hope that the program is funded, in future years as well. Are there any questions?
Yep, comments, questions?
I just have one question. What if it's not funded in future years? What are we going to do?
Well, what we've done is we have built these agreements to extend us all the way through the fall of 2018. And so what we're doing is, as we're bringing these chunks in, we are trying to make sure that we're not dependent annually year to year, and that we will hopefully get far enough that at that point we won't be adopting any paper content anymore, and that if this is not funded, then we will still have instructional material categorical. Hopefully, it's that's always been funded at various levels, right. And that would roll into providing the content. And hopefully, that leaves us in a position where that in a year from now or 2 years from now, if it is funded, we can continue to expand the platforms and we can utilize that for more PD. But we're not dependent upon it to get through until these until the bulk of our core subjects are going to be adopted again.
Great, thank you very much for that.
Ms. LaRiviere.
And correct me if I'm wrong, it is my understanding that all of the resources that are available to the students besides the curriculum adopted, they will be able to have access to most all of that, whether they have access to the internet or not, correct?
A good portion of it is available offline. So each one of the content providers, they give us our usage rights. So when you purchase, well, when I say purchase, you license content. Okay, the majority of the content that is provided through your traditional textbook companies, a lot of that can be downloaded offline. About 60% of the additional videos provided through the other content providers is available offline. And we have, as part of our training, we make sure that the teachers know that we really want to make sure that we're using those resources that can be downloaded and used even if the student doesn't have internet. So we also have provided in our other tools that go along with the one-to-one, the ability to synchronize your documents offline and all those things, so that if the student does not have internet at home, they can still complete their assignments. So I would say that you have, between the textbook content and the other resources, you have around 70%, I think, is what's available that you could download offline as well.
So students would have access to most anything they need to do any research work and so on, to work towards a paper
Oh, yeah.
Correct. That's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
I was pleased to see how much you've put towards professional development. Can you talk a little bit about what the professional development will be and how you will determine whether or not it's been effective and appropriate?
I think Melissa could probably talk a little bit more detail about the PD as she's been through it. I can speak to the platform PD, and the platform PD is essentially they're providing on-site resources for us to deliver instruction for the teachers, and of course we use a train the trainer. So as far as the one-to-one.
And we have been, last school year, we started with tech leaders from each one of the buildings that came to monthly training, where we started with the use of Google tools and how to use the technology, and then built the training into how do you truly impact instruction with the use of the tool. And so we have throughout the year and the summer, because our tech leaders came back this summer to develop the training then they would implement in their individual schools and the support that they would have in place for their school for the implementation. We have gathered feedback and survey information from them about what they've found most useful, how we could improve it, because we have the high school implementation coming up. And so we're really going to use that data. We've worked a lot with our in-house trainers and Innovative Designs for Education to really build that around what our teachers need.
Okay, thank you. Other comments, questions? Thank you very much. And that brings us to public comment. Is there anybody on the right side of the auditorium who wishes to address the board about items on the agenda, briefing agenda this afternoon? I see Mrs. Quackenbush. Is there anybody else? Anybody on the left side? Mr. Fox. Mrs. Quackenbush.
Thank you for allowing us to speak today. I was also at the town hall meeting with Board Member Fisher, and thank you very much for doing that. It was really good to listen to the teachers who are really standing on the wall with our children every day. And it's not that they don't know or they don't understand or they need to be educated on the tests, is that they understand and they do know that the time we spend on testing is way overboard and does not allow the children to actually learn. That was what the teachers said. They said they know what their students are learning. They see them every day. They know who is progressing and who's not and at what rate. These tests are duplicative and rob the children of the time in the classroom to learn that they need. So I would heartily recommend that you really do listen to these teachers. They were very eloquent, and several of these were a part of the development of these tests as well. And they knew that the test development was flawed in and of itself, and that the delivery is flawed, and the taking away of the time is counterproductive for the kids. And so I do not think that addition of tests in any way, shape, or form, in spite of the fact it's wonderful to have data, sometimes we have too much data and not enough progress. If we're spending too much time measuring and not enough learning, we'll have the kind of scores that we are now demonstrating. Our school scores, our whole county scores have declined. They are very bad, and in relation to other districts and in relation to the average of the state, our scores are not improving, in spite of the maniacal obsession we have had with testing. Perhaps it's the testing itself we need to examine, cut it back. Now, when we went to the state last year in Tallahassee, they said they were going to end progress monitoring. We submitted a schedule with none of that on it, and yet we continued to test just as before. We had just as many or more tests than we had the year before. And this year, we're going to do the same. Now, in spite of this cutback test agenda that they put forth today, they also said it was voluntary and determined by the principal. I would think that those principals are going to continue to do exactly as we did last year, continue testing, 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 even though it's counterproductive. our student scores declined. We really have to look at that and say, okay, let's read this data and say, we've got to change something. Let's cut back on testing, really, not just pretend and call them checkpoints. No one was fooled. Thank you very much.
Mr. Fox.
Board, I appreciate it. Wanted to address a couple things. Dr. Graham, I got your letter of apology, which for the mishap on the finance committee thing. Don't worry about it. In the construction business, we have a good saying, and if you don't make mistakes, you're not really working. It's no big deal. The truth is the finance committee really let you down. We had very poor attendance throughout the year, and we knew we did try to put the August meeting together. We didn't have a quorum to vote it in ourselves, and it put your department in the middle of trying to get ready for a school year, you know, just one more thing on the pile. And really, appreciate the letter and the sentiment, but it's the finance committee will try to get its act together for the board's and the school district's benefit. So, but thank you. The second thing I wanted to address was to let you know my niece just got hired by the district. She's teaching at Lehigh Middle as 6th grade language arts, and she's a real firecracker, spark plug type. She speaks Spanish, and she's really eager to help those kids out there. About 90% of her kids are Spanish speaking. But what I was talking with her about it. She's real excited. She's part of the mentoring program, the TIF. Some of the teachers from Lehigh High School have come over to the middle school and are now mentoring over there, and she loves it. It's a big help to her. And just starting out in the district, you know, it's difficult even for...
Mr. Fox, I'm sorry, I need to stop your time and ask you to please address an issue that's on the agenda.
Yeah.
We need you to tie that in, please.
Well, I'm sorry. I thought it was open public comment, agenda items. Oh, well, okay. Can't hit the curve. So, okay, I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Board comments. We'll start with Mrs. Fisher.
I have no comments. I'll reserve them for this evening. Thank you.
Let's see. I'm very grateful for the beginning of a meeting that we had, beginning of where I believe we're going to go with some working together with our legislative delegation, our county commissioners, and the board. I'm very appreciative of everyone that was able to attend, and they're being forthcoming in their remarks. I have also had the opportunity, but I think I'll share some things I want to wait until this evening, just so some others might be able to hear as well. So.
Okay. Let's see. First of all, what do we do about the board student advisory committee meeting on September 29th? Mrs. Dozier, our liaison, is not able to attend, and only Mrs. Fisher has no other commitments. So we need to decide. Yeah, we need to decide what we want to do. And since Mrs. Dozier will be here this evening, maybe we'll push that off to this evening.
Okay.
Mr. Toiber and I will both be unable to chair the September 22nd meeting, though we may attend by phone. So Mrs. Dozier, Ms. LaRiviere, and Mrs. Fisher need to decide who will chair that meeting, and then we also need to decide whether or not we want to cancel the workshop scheduled for that day. I'll let you think about that. I will mention that Carol Cook is going to be the FSBA facilitator for our workshop scheduled for October 12th and 13th. I've asked that she contact board members individually to get your your ideas about what you would like to have on that agenda, and then she and I will work on that agenda. Student scores were mentioned already. I want to note that we made good progress on ACT. In English especially, we've done really well this year. Lee's scores were 18.5. The benchmark is 18. We were at the benchmark in 13-14, so we exceeded our 3% growth rate for 14-15, which is great progress. In math, well, there are areas where we need improvement, so I'll just note. Benchmark is 22, Lee is 19, state is 19.6. We increased math by 1.6%. If we increase 3% per year, our benchmark is achievable in 2019-20, which is 5 years. So we may want to think about the percentage if we're going to, in future strategic plan meetings. Reading, the benchmark is 22, Lee was 20.8, state is 21. If we increased our reading by 2.5%, if we increased by 3% per year, the benchmark is achievable in 2 years. So there we go. Reading looks like it's right on track. That's great. We increased science by 2.6%. Benchmark is 23. Lee was 19.2. State was 19.5. If we increase by 3% per year, the benchmark is achievable in 6 years. So that's something that requires attention. Went to the Dunbar Middle School Welcome Back for Teachers, hosted by John Moran, his wife, and their church, and that was a pretty awesome welcome back for teachers. I want to compliment Dr. Graham, Mark Mora, Amy Desamore for their work with the Horizon Council Infrastructure Task Force. They had a second meeting with the task force and did a great job presenting. I think that they are beginning, I think better than beginning. I think they have made real inroads with the business community in terms of understanding what our capital problems are, and so I wanted to pass that on. I met with the Southwest Florida Community Foundation Executive Director Sarah Owen regarding Future Makers. Southwest Florida Community Foundation, in partnership with the Lumina Foundation, is facilitating a partnership of educators, workforce developers, business leaders, economic development professionals, government officials, residents, and students who understand a healthy and thriving region depends on more people securing and stabilizing their careers with advanced credentials. It's called the Future Makers Coalition, and I will call attention to the fact that our superintendent's picture is on the cover. She has been involved with this, and they are coming back to do a presentation. Oh, there you go. Lumina's bringing some people in on the 19th for a 3-hour conversation about developing a plan. And I'm really excited about that because it's the 6 regional action teams that are working on this together, not just Lee County alone. Fort Myers City Council approved participation in the National Resource Network Technical Assistance Program. It's a national program providing assistance to eligible communities to identify and implement new and practical solutions to facilitate recovery and growth in Fort Myers. They have access to professional technical assistance from experts nationwide. Mr. Bohatch and I were interviewed during the site visit, during which time the team asked us questions about the city's challenges and to identify specific opportunities where NRN could provide direct assistance. I think both he and I really enjoyed the conversations. Great questions were asked, and I think we're both kind of excited about. This is a $10 million initiative grant that Fort Myers got, so I think that's something to be excited about. And then I also wanted to mention the meeting with the legislative delegation and county commissioners. My takeaway, not the board takeaway, my personal takeaway is 1, county commission's not going to do anything about impact fees. 2, state legislature's not going to do anything about millage, and any legislative relief that they contemplated providing would take time to implement, and the fact of the matter is our problem is in the next 5 years. So we're right back where we started, but we all know the story now. The story is it's on us. It's on the people in our community, and we got to figure out how to get the community engaged in solving this problem. But I thought it was a very good discussion, and so I was grateful that Mr. Teuber and Mr. Caldwell and Mr. Sarah were able to put that together. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Did you want to go back to your, are you going to?
Oh, yes, thank you. So just any thoughts about the September 22nd meeting? We have 2 issues. One is we need a chair, and 2, do we want to have a workshop with both Mr. Teuber, who may be able to attend by phone, and I will, I feel the same way, and I will not be able to attend the workshop by phone. I will try to attend the meeting.
Since, if I may?
Yeah.
Yeah, since Mrs. Dozier will be here this evening, can we postpone that discussion till then?
And we'll come back to what we're going to do about the student advisory meeting as
Yes.
well.
Thank you.
Okay. And that was that. All right, thank you. Mr. Martin?
Nothing this afternoon, thank you.
Dr. Graham?
Nothing, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and we will be convening again at 5:05 for our special meeting. Thank you.